I'm Matthew.
I'm Marty.
I'm Carlos.
And we are the Heroes 3. Welcome to Heroes 3, the bi-weekly podcast where three friends explore the best, worst, and everything in between in the world of Asian cinema. And this week we have a very special treat for Halloween season, and that is The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires from 1974, directed by not a Hong Kong person, Roy Ward Baker, and starring Peter Cushing.
You begged for it. You asked for it by name.
Everyone's been clamoring for the Golden Vampires. This is a co-production between Hammer Films and Shaw Brothers. So Hammer, who is of course famous for the Hammer horror films with usually starring Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee, Frankenstein or Van Helsing or Dracula, one of those.
They just took all of those guys and they're like, all right, you're doing all of them now. That's great. Yeah,
unfortunately, no Christopher Lee in this movie, but we do get Peter Cushing as the main character, which is pretty wild.
Yeah. And if you look at like the crediting for this, he's listed as a Lawrence Van Helsing, which is not the Abraham Van Helsing that you'd come to know from the Dracula stuff like Bram Stoker and everything. So it's interesting here. This is 1974, and this is actually, I believe, the last Hammer film. And I read a thing saying that Christopher Lee read the script and was like, "Nuh-uh, I'm not doing this." So we have somebody else here. But it's a really interesting, fun thing. And I whenever I see stuff like this, whether I've seen it or not, and I'd seen this some years back, but this was also something that was like, oh, this would be interesting for us to talk about on Halloween because it's such an outlier. Shaw Brothers and Hammer, they did two films. They did this, and they did it like kind of a spy-ish, kind of James Bond-ish thing, which I did watch, and I wasn't as big a fan of. And I think it's like on YouTube, you can just watch it. But this is pretty fun. You're taking all of the things that you know about Hammer horror and Dracula, and kind of inserting all of the exciting things that people were clamoring for in 1974 when it comes to martial arts cinema. So like we're talking about a post Bruce Lee world here, right? And they're like, hey, Shaw Brothers wanna do this thing, and they're like, let's do it, and this is what we get. It's pretty fun.
It's a weird middle period too, because like you said, it's 1974. Bruce Lee's just died, and there isn't really like a new big star just yet in any of the major studios. So it's kind of, there's a lot of names in here that like some of them I recognize and some of them definitely aren't our usual kind of stable of Hong Kong actors.
Yeah, that's such a good point. We've touched on this tiny little era of a handful of times in the podcast, but yeah, I totally agree with you, Matthew. There is this kind of weird void in between Bruce and then, you know, like the rise of Gordon Liu and Jackie at the end of the 70s. But yeah, dude, this is such a special little treasure of a movie. And honestly, even just looking at it on paper, there's something about Hammer and Shaw that they're just like kindred spirits of production companies. Oh, yeah. Like very, very well matched, right? It's like a similar kind of size and impact in their respective territories. Similar kind of assembly line approach, but a lot of, I think, kind of overlapping touchstones in terms of like the elements we see on screen, like some of the violence, some of the shock and awe, yet some point. Of the maybe kind of like lofty kind of thematic ideas. And it's funny because I think I was expecting maybe a little bit more of a goof, but the movie's played pretty straight, and I think it holds together remarkably well. Yeah. And also want to shout out Lau Garlung and Lau Garwing and some of that crew. Some really successful action sequences, I would say. I mean, things that I've read, it seems like there's kind of like varying claims on just how much the credited director Roy Ward Baker is responsible for, and then in the years since, Chang Che has been kind of credited as having kind of ghost directed
Right.
some of the action. It's hard to, yeah, unfortunately, it's hard to know. There are one or two sequences that you could almost imagine shot kind of like as a pickup later, similar to, we haven't covered it in the show, but we've mentioned, I think, Jackie Chan's The Protector, and Jackie kind of basically ordered a round of reshoots to add some more like Hong Kong style action to the Asian cut of the film. And I almost thought I detected maybe a couple of sequences like that, but we also have some just great action where like Peter Cushing is literally in the frame,
Yeah.
like throwing around a lit torch and stuff. And I don't know, the way that some of the action is shot, it just doesn't really remind me of things that we see in the mid 70s or from Chang-Chi during this period. So I wouldn't be surprised if Roy Ward Baker was actually shooting some of this action, which makes this like a really unique relic. I mean, you don't, just trying to trying to visualize Lal Garlong working with this British, probably stuck in
Yeah.
his ways from all reports, Baker. It's that, I mean, that'd be a sight to see.
We have heard these stories, I mean, especially with Enter the Dragon, about this kind of culture clash between two production teams. And there are some interviews with Roy Ward Baker, and there's some stories that have been passed along over the years about similar things where they were of the expectation to have like a soundstage. And once they got there, maybe it wasn't as soundproof as they thought, or they didn't realize that people were shooting without sound and that would be plugged in later, and that causing some frustrations. It's also outside of just the language barriers that they'd have to deal with. But I like what you're saying there, Marty, about how it all kind of comes together in an interesting way, where I was expecting to have my kind of Heroes 3 sense to be able to tell, okay, this is this person, this is that person. And when you're seeing, you can see the action play out in a way that you're expecting from something like a Lao Garlong or Chang-Chi. But actually, when you're seeing how the camera is handled in some instances and how the kind of the plot progression plays out, it does really feel like a mix of both worlds. And I think it's kind of to a benefit, because we're used to like Hong Kong films doing all these zigzags in the plot and just randomly something matters, and actually feel like all of those wrinkles.
Yeah, this is so restrained, man.
Yeah, they're really smoothed out for a film like this. And
I really genuinely think that this is like it's a pattern that I think later Hong Kong movies would have, that I think is really kind of refreshing to see in a movie from the early 70s, where it's like there is a straightforward plot. It's, Dracula's returned. They need to get a guy to help them fight Dracula. They trek across the country and they fight Dracula.
Yeah.
It's like, it is very straightforward, point A to B to C. There's cool like ways to show the progression, like their clothes get dirtier. The main white female lead is like getting less and less clothing across the movie. There's stuff to show how the things are moving along. It's really nice. I genuinely kind of love this movie. I was shocked.
And I mean, we should also say that I did provide both versions. There's two versions of this movie, and I feel like the original cut of the film is what we're referencing. The American or the Western cut of this, it really kind of butchers it. They take like 20 minutes out of the runtime, and they kind of splice in action from later in the film throughout the movie, and it's actually like bad where same scenes like repeat themselves, which is like what. But so there's that, and that's something that kind of can be expected. And I believe that cut version of the film was released a bit later in the West, so I think 79 is when the Western version was released. The one thing that I kind of think of it, and I mean, this is my Castlevania brain, where I'm like, all right, what's the lore here, and how are we gonna try and figure out like what are the weaknesses of these characters? And they don't go into it as as much as I kind of would hope. Like something like
Sure.
Spooky Encounters or Mr. Vampire. There's all these like very specific rules and very specific behaviors that these creatures fall under, and you don't really get a lot of that. But I also feel like that's something like maybe this kind of hand-in-hand production kind of didn't spend the time to kind of work on, but I still think that there's enough that you could pull from and kind of create something. And honestly, I feel like this could have really been a kind of stepping stone into something exciting, but it's also cool that it's kind of just this one-off thing.
Yeah. And I do love that they do brush against that though.
Yeah.
That's one of the way I wrote it in my notes was that what this feels like is it feels like a crossover comic book made into a movie.
Oh, yeah, wow, nice.
Like
yeah.
where you have these characters from like different things, and obviously David Chang's character isn't actually from like another Shaw Brothers movie, but he might as well be. Like we've seen these type of characters before, but it's basically like this, martial arts master from Hong Kong and the vampire expert of Van Helsing coming together, and the worlds colliding, and them, finding common ground, and Van Helsing saying like, well, my favorite is whenever he's like, well, the vampires are afraid of basically holy symbols. Yeah. So in Europe, that's the cross and Christ.
I love that.
And over here, that's Buddha.
The image of Buddha.
And I love that.
Yeah, that was so cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
In Europe, the vampire walks in dread of the crucifix. And here, it will be the image of the Lord Buddha. These are our protection.
I love that it's never even a question of like, one of us is right and the other one isn't. It's just, no, well, in Europe, it's Jesus, and here it's Buddha. Mm-hmm. So use Santa Buddha to fight off the vampires.
This is a weird pull too, but there's a classic X-Men comic where they fight Dracula, and there's a moment in this X-Men comic where Wolverine knows like, oh, like if I show the cross to Dracula, it'll like stop him. But what ends up happening is it backfires on Wolverine because he's not a believer. And Nightcrawler, very religious character, tells him that. He explains it to him. I love when like little,
that's really cool.
Yeah, little ideas like that prop up, and I get reminded of that and stuff like this. I do really love too that. So the film's called The Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, and we see those seven golden vampires throughout the film, and they have this blinged out bat gold amulet. And that in a way it seems like that's like also their weakness. So like right at the beginning of the film, and we're gonna play real loose. This is a Halloween episode, so we're not gonna get too into the plot, but the golden bat is kind of ripped away from one of the vampires, and he basically like deflates, which is great.
It's cool. And it's a fun effect too.
Yeah, I do think the practical effects are pretty low budget. I mean, looking, but I mean, I think they're really effective, and they kind of leave a lasting impression every time.
It's super classic. It's a lot of like dissolve transitions.
Yes.
And
deflating.
Still, totally.
Yeah, literally like making it looks like there's a dummy made, like a dummy that's inflatable. They put a bunch of stuff on top of.
Oh man,
let it
super fun.
And the effects really feel like a meeting of the minds too. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some mix of like a Hong Kong practical effects guy and a Hammer effects person like working together or something.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, Hammer blood is also very bright red.
Yeah,
so
very true.
Nice.
So that's a match made in heaven right there.
Yeah,
we should say it is a very bloody movie. So
it does almost lean into like exploitative cinema, because we get these very violent
like
moments.
Later Hammer movies do too.
Yeah.
So
I think this is the most nudity that we've covered on a podcast episode. Usually we'll get like a boob somewhere, but there's plenty of naked ladies in panic in this film.
Let's say it's pretty harrowing though. It's usually like these women are getting taken away to be sacrificed. It's not a very fun nudity.
The lair, like the temple of the seven golden vampires.
Yes.
It's these like inside sets, like right at the beginning of the movie. I mean, we can kind of brush through this pretty quickly, but at the beginning of the film, you see a monk traveling through the mountainside looking pretty weary, and he spots a castle off on the horizon, and that's Dracula's castle. So he arrives there, and the set, like the inside of that castle looks so cool. It's so well lit. And he very quickly sees Dracula's tomb. And then from the tomb arrives Dracula, who, like we said, is not Christopher Lee here. Is played by somebody
John
else.
Forbes Robertson.
He's a
who
pretty
is
good
kind of,
stand-in. He's trying to channel Chris's look.
He is the other Dracula Hammer had.
Yes.
Dracula in Hammer was usually Christopher Lee, but if it wasn't Christopher Lee, it was John Forbes Robertson.
Yep. Oh,
so
my other Castlevania pull is that Christopher B is Dracula in the first Castlevania game.
Oh,
they have
man.
those,
right.
mock
'Cause it has the silly credits at the end of
Yep.
it.
And I think James Bernard is James Banana in Castlevania, the original. That's the composer from the Horror of Dracula, which I love. But
Awesome.
yeah, it's really funny how they basically bookend the movie with Dracula scenes. And at the beginning here, you see
James
that...
Bernard is the composer for this movie too.
Yeah.
Really?
He was a big Hammer guy.
Oh,
Yep.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. James Banana all the way.
James.
So Dracula arrives, and he's like, I can't do your bidding. I'm Dracula. And he's like, but I do need to get out of this castle, which they don't really explain. But he's like, I'll take your form. So then he basically possesses Ka, the monk, and for the rest of the film, Ka is Dracula. And I do really love the kind of bit where Dracula is speaking, but they're using the Hong Kong actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so
and
good.
we're not really attempting to like sync up the lips to
It's awesome. I love it.
even the right language. It's great.
Mhm. But very shortly after that,
And honestly, that kind of reminds me of like Italian film from the 70s, where like everyone's just speaking
totally.
everyone just speaks their own language on set, and then they just dub it over later.
yeah,
Oh
Which is
man,
just-
that would be the other
sounds like a
crossover we
nightmare,
never got.
but-
It's like spaghetti western meets
Oh
Golden
man,
Harvest
Sergio
or
Leone
something.
doing
wow.
doing a kung fu action movie. I mean,
That would
I feel like weirder
God.
things have happened.
yeah, that's awesome.
Oh wow.
So they rush you into. They say it's Chungking in the year 1904, and we're introduced to Peter Cushing's Lawrence Van Helsing, and he's giving
He's like
kind
a
of a
visiting,
lecture,
professor.
and actually get some like Indiana Jones vibes from the
Yeah,
like
totally.
scenario
Oh
here. Yeah, which is kind of fun to think about, and actually like all of the deaths, like Dracula's death, the kind of disintegration
some
and
like
stuff,
Ark of the
like-
Covenant.
yeah,
demise.
definitely.
Yeah.
But he's speaking to this crowd, and they're not eating up what he's delivering to them. He's basically telling them about the 7 golden vampires. He's aware of this story. He believes it's true, but he doesn't know what's what. And
But the
in
camera
that
does
crowd-
settle on David Chang's character
Yes.
in a really, really nice way.
And this is actually like the first kind of substantial role that we have for David Chang on the podcast, who is a very notable Hong Kong actor with a long, storied career. I believe he's still around. He's probably
He is
Mid-70s
He's in his
or something?
70s. Yeah,
Yeah.
76 years young.
and I think
And this
I
is
remember,
a part he has to deliver entirely in English, which is pretty unexpected for the era.
Mm-hmm.
I'm into it actually. I feel like
Yeah, I think he comes across great.
I was pleasantly surprised with the delivery for all the Asian actors that we have here that are in these English speaking roles. I think it all works really well. We even have a female lead who I feel like sometimes David Chang's acting is better than hers.
Sure.
So that introduces those characters, and what you find out is that David Chang, his character Si Ching, is a descendant of the story that Van Helsing was relating to the crowd, where there was a man that tried to fight these vampires. He was able to kill one of them, which I think is also fun that, we've got 7 golden vampires. That's a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of one right away.
But it's
Yeah,
it's 6 for most of the movie.
Yeah, I love that. I also love that in I believe it's the trailer for the English version, they make a point to say the 7 brothers and 1 sister versus the versus
Nice.
Dracula versus the vampires, which is funny.
As the 7 brothers and their 1 sister meet Dracula.
But yeah, he is part of a family that's basically hoping to return their town to freedom away from these 7 golden vampires. And at the same time, you've got Dracula, who I guess by now it's been something like 100 years, has sunk his teeth into this town. And slowly but surely they make their way, and there's a little bit of road bumps on the way. They do encounter this adventurous woman named Vanessa Buren, who's played by Julia Eggy, I believe her name is. Julie Eggy?
I think it's Egga.
Okay,
but
cool.
Julia Egga. But yeah,
very
she was a
European.
Norwegian actress, model, kind of in a lot of random stuff.
Yeah, she was a Bond girl, if I'm remembering right. But
Yep.
yeah, so she is of a certain wealth, and she's interested in an adventure, and she kind of gets roped into this scenario. There is kind of like a mob boss that has his eyes on her, and that causes some conflict. But that also is another thing that I would say I feel like every 10 minutes or so you're treated to an action sequence, and it just really does keep the movie rolling pretty quickly.
It does.
And
there's a lot of really, like you said, it's like it has this kind of pacing that like you said, it reminds me of Indiana Jones, but that's just because Indiana Jones also has really good pacing.
Right.
Where there's like every 10 to 15 minutes there's a good action set piece after a good like build up to it and a fun location and things like that. So
yeah, it's great. So this kind of antagonist, Lung Hong is his name, and what you'll see is we'll see some familiar faces. Right away, one of his right hand men it's Yen Shi Quan, who we'd see in so many films, but I guess notably in Once Upon a Time in China, and you were also treated to some of the Lau Garlang's group. So you see Lau Gar Wing, he's the archer on the good guy side.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really fun time. I really do enjoy that. Basically, David Chang, Si Ching's family, each of them has their own weapon. It's like a video game again. We talk about this so much, but
but yeah, there's the double sword guy, the double axe guy, the archer, the spear. It's very cool.
Yeah,
when I love that campfire scene when David Chang's character basically kind of points out and spotlights like each of the fighters and what their weapons are, and actually also I mean, there are a lot of great Hong Kong stuntmen working on this. Not all of whom are easy to make out, but yeah, apparently Yun Shun Yi and Brandy Yun are also in the
I was really looking, trying to find those screenshots for you guys, but it was too hard to tell.
But you will see Tina Wong prominently, and then Xu Sha, actually in a couple different parts of the movie. So.
Yeah, he's one of the bad guy's goons. I remember noticing him in that kind of alleyway fight. And they're not pulling their punches with these fights either. People are getting stabbed. You're seeing that Shaw Brothers or Hammer horror blood, which it's really fun. There's a really great set piece where they're out in the field and they all get ambushed as they're making their way out of the town, and everybody gets these moments to shine.
Yeah,
there's a really great mixture of soundstage and outdoor shooting in this movie. Yeah. Where I feel like that's one downside of a lot of Shaw Brothers from this time is that like everything's on a soundstage no matter what. Which, while technically probably being more expensive than shooting out in nature, there's something about it that's really nice.
Oh yeah, that's such a great point, because there's some really, really nice. There's this crazy cave. They find a real cave, and I mean there's an inside set for that, but seeing them arrive to that cave, it looks cool. I was like, I want to see that.
Yeah, totally.
I also love how the brother, or I guess the siblings have, they're dressed like you expect heroes from a Shaw Brothers movie to dress.
Right.
But then we got our 3 white guys with like Peter Cushing has his like pith hat and stuff.
Thank you. I was gonna ask
I love their outfits.
What that's the name of that safari hat
pith
is.
Hat. Yep.
I love
pith
that.
is like that's like the material that it's made out of.
Oh, great. That's so fun.
Amazing. Oh yeah, and we also should say like Van Helsing has a son you're forgiven if you
Yeah.
forgot about that
He's kind of a
character.
wiener, but
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious how they kind of keep him in the middle of the action too, and you see all of these
Yeah.
proficient action, dudes, and like this guy's just kind of tossing and turning, and I mean, even Peter Cushing, I feel like, I mean, from my perspective, it's like, dude, you're old. I'm really impressed that you're rolling with some of these, but sometimes it
Yeah,
looks like he's
totally.
just kind of swinging wild and stuff. But
Right.
yeah, it's like you said, he's right in the middle of these action sequences, and some of these sequences have, like, I don't know, over 40 characters, because
Yeah, really,
the-
really impressive. And there's so many. We've talked about this a little bit in our Lau Garlong arc, but I feel like it's really on display here. It's kind of this multi-plane of action. It's like very three-dimensional, and he does such a great job of managing like the background and foreground, and whoever's working the camera is really moving in tandem with that.
Yeah, I would say almost all of the major sequences of action have more than a dozen people fighting at
Yeah.
once. And yeah, we also haven't mentioned that sister who's played by Shizu. I think
great.
pound for pound, her screen time, she makes it really count. She almost looks better than a lot of the male performers in
Yeah,
this film. And
agreed.
she's got this kind of cool like double dagger situation. But also there's the twins too, that they always fight holding hands, which I think
Yeah,
is
that's awesome.
amazing. Like, you don't know anything about them outside of that, but even that is substantial enough so that at the end, in the final climax, you see a lot of these characters die, and you get a moment where you're like, no, not the brothers, like,
Yeah.
they're gonna die now, which is really fun.
And just that like hand holding, spinning, it's part of their choreography, and it always breaks up the frame in an awesome way.
Yeah, and all of the weaponry too is these very oversized, bright silver,
Yeah.
like a video game item that you'd pick up off the ground if you're playing a beat 'em up. It's like totally looks like that, and yeah, it really does a lot to sell the action. So yeah, they make their way, they find this cave, and they're kind of hiding out because it's a long journey, and by now they've there's the 6 vampires left. They don't know if they're on their way, and they're ambushed. It's really great. They're like, I think Leyland says, like, we haven't seen any anything living for the last like 20 miles, but you see very pointedly that there are 3 bats perched in the cave, and they
Way
do
to go, Wayland.
yeah, they do this fun like bat on a wire, like swinging
Yeah.
through, and they do this kind of wipe to transition where they fly behind an item, and then the golden
the
vampire shows
pops
up.
out.
I love it. I love it. And
very
so
silly.
good.
great action sequence breaks out, and you see them all get taken out. And at first I'm like, oh man, these guys don't seem too tough. But at the end of that sequence, Siching says that, we can't keep this up. This is going to be the end of us, but we have to make our way still.
My brothers cannot survive another attack, Professor.
We've destroyed half their number. 3 still remain. Just 3 demons terrorizing Ping Kwei, your ancestral village.
And the other thing that they do is they pepper in this kind of little cross-culture romance between some of these characters. So Vanessa Buren kind of takes a shine to Siching, and then Leyland takes a shine to Shitsu's character. I think her name is May, I believe they call her. And over the course of the film, that plays out, and that's kind of hammy, but it's kind of an aspect that you would expect in something like this. And they make their way to Ping Kwei, which is the name of the city that is being ravaged by these vampires, and that sets us up for the finale.
Yeah. And it's cool. It's like a siege. Like they're spending the day like prepping all these like barricades and stuff. Everyone looks exhausted and it's all dirty and stuff. It's really cool. It's like getting like that calm before the storm kind of vibe to it, which is something you don't really see a whole lot in our movies.
Yeah.
Right.
The just for like random thoughts. I watched in prep for this. I had actually never seen any Hammer horror movies before. It was one of those things I had always heard of because of Star Wars. All the things where I was like, oh, Peter Cushing, he was in a bunch of Hammer movies. And I'm like, I'm 7. I don't know what that means.
Right.
So it was really cool to I watched through a couple for this.
I mean, I think Horror of Dracula, I think, is a really cool film.
Horror of Dracula is very good.
There's some
classic.
really great, iconic work there from, especially
And,
like shots of Christopher Lee. It just looks so cool. Like, I love it.
And the Curse of Frankenstein was the other one I watched, and Curse of Frankenstein's so good.
I haven't seen that.
really loved it.
Yeah, I should check it out.
Yeah,
Actually,
he Cushing he plays Dr. Frankenstein, and he my friend Spivsy, who we tried to get on this episode, but schedules couldn't line up. He'll definitely be on something else in the future.
yeah,
But,
for sure.
he described his character as a turbo bastard, which was so good. But yeah, he is very villainous, and there's a couple of scenes where I was genuinely like, "Whoa, okay."
Whoa, nice.
If you step back a little, you'll see better. Look out, Professor, look out!
And he's really good as a villain. So
Man, awesome.
it's really it's always fun seeing a character who's usually playing a villain playing a good guy, because there's still like that intense kind of energy to it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I definitely want to like praise Cushing a little bit here. Another thing I was bracing myself for, I guess, is that maybe he wasn't going to bring like kind of the requisite enthusiasm or something to this crazy on location Hong Kong production, but I feel like he's always really present with David and their scenes together, and I don't know, I feel like he's really giving it his all, and
I completely
I
agree.
think it's really crucial for the movie hanging together.
Yeah, and I think there are certain sequences, like maybe in the cave or something, where there's like these expository scenes where I feel like, you know, we're kind of on a language barrier where, you know, I mean, I still do feel like it's still working, but you never get the sense that Van Helsing is kind of talking down to any of these characters.
Right.
There are moments where it does feel like when the action breaks out, you got like the white people watching the Asians do their
from a
thing,
safe
right? So
distance.
yeah, it's like really funny to me when you see all of that. But it honestly, I mean, outside of that, everything else feels pretty even. And I do feel like Peter Cushing really invested himself, like you're saying. So I appreciate that, and
he's a consummate professional.
Yeah, and I mean
totally.
he has that kind of presence too, and you really do feel it. It's funny sometimes when you see him in the scene and his presence is so strong, and then you see these other characters that are kind of trying to kind of reach up to that level, and it doesn't really quite match, but I think it kind of adds a little fun flavor to the film.
So one pretty big part of this that we haven't mentioned yet is it's not just the vampires, but they have like this army of the damned with them. This like kind of ghost thrall army that just kind of shuffles around.
Oh man, they have this little hop. It's not a hop like what we would say.
Not
like,
a Jiangxi hop.
Jiangxi hop.
But they little like bounce to their marching. It's really funny. And the other thing I would say is too, I mean, if you haven't seen this and you hear that it's a Hong Kong film and you're kind of familiar with Hong Kong stuff, you're expecting something very Jiangxi or something like that. And I think that there's a more worldly kind of horror to it. These guys look like ghouls more than anything else. They do have like maybe like a Chinese sword or something, but you're not getting like kind of a cultural representation of what you'd think a vampire from China would be. It's more kind of like this kind of generalized. And I think it works. Honestly, I think if you wanted to take something a step further like this, like different cultures clashing could be a factor in the plot. And I think that could kind of be a fun thing. But honestly, in a film from 1974, that could have ended up really problematic too.
Yeah.
But I think
that's always how we feel whenever we talk about that kind of stuff with these movies. Is like, oh yeah, it'd be awesome if there was more people from different cultures or more like women in prominent roles. And then sometimes you watch movies that have women in more prominent roles, and it's like, oh no,
yeah, you goofed.
Oh no,
you messed up.
Not like that.
You know what I did forget to mention though is that we do get a very jump scare. Frog getting his head chopped off right at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're right.
I was like watching it and I was like, oh man, this might be fun to show Joanna. And then I see that
was a
deal
breaker for Run Shaw. He's like,
Yep.
we're gonna work together.
We have to have at least one small animal die on screen.
It's like a foreground establishing shot too. It's like here, all right, frog, chop the head, focus on the guy in the back.
And just
we're good.
imagine seeing it in the theater, and it's like 40 feet wide. Oh man.
Oh man. But okay, so we've taken a little detour, but here we are back at the finale of this film, and what we can say too is that they're taking siege on the city. A huge fight breaks out. They've dug these trenches, like you were saying. They're preparing for war. Basically, they've got all these spike kind of barriers, and first the 3 like golden vampires jump in, and then all of the hordes of the damned show up, and you got a huge amazing sequence. Slowly but surely our heroes are being taken out, and actually one of the golden vampires targets Vanessa Buren, and what you see is that she gets turned into a vampire, and it takes a very dramatic turn where Si Ching goes to help her, and there's this kind of funny interaction where they're kind of looking at each other, and then she just bites him, and you're like, holy crap, oh no. So then he at the advice of Van Helsing, he takes her out, he impales her on a spike, and he makes the very dramatic decision to impale himself as well.
Dude.
I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. And in a weird way, I'm like, man, that should have been like Leyland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should have been like the other couple, maybe.
Should have been the lame guy.
Yeah. But I mean, here we are. So that basically sets up the bookend to our film, where we go back to the Ka's temple, the pagoda, and we have to also really establish how cool this set is. There's center like kind of an arena with these kind of sacrificial tables, and at the feet of the table in the center is like this, I don't know, blood soup, like a broth or
Yeah,
something.
I was thinking because the tables are all like slanted in towards this big bowl in the middle.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's red. It definitely doesn't look like blood.
Yeah.
It's just kind of red.
This is also a thing where it's like you don't really know that much about it, but it kind of serves kind of a cool looking purpose. So you're like, oh,
Right.
I mean, you do see the women get sacrificed at one point, but you don't see what they kind of do with whatever that is.
Yeah,
in
like
the center.
what's the purpose of it? Yeah.
So May gets captured, and Leyland chases her up to the temple, and they're able to free her, and they're able to kind of toss that last golden vampire into the broth, and he turns into like this kind of skeleton, I don't know, putty or whatever. And that's a fun dissolve too, where we see the effects shots, and those dissolves, some of them last a long time. It's like
really.
30 seconds of this effect shot. But it's really fun. And then Van Helsing himself shows up, and Ka and him meet, and he understands that this is actually Dracula. And instead of having kind of a cool one-on-one kind of martial arts fight, it's just kind of them tumbling around a bit. And it's almost accidental at how Dracula is impaled here.
Although maybe you could interpret that like Van Helsing is like somehow absorbed kung fu from his travels or something.
I love that. I mean, it would be amazing to see some type of one-on-one martial arts fight with something like Dracula. Like that would be... That
or
could
a
be
flash
amazing.
black with like a blue filter or something. And then
a training montage of Dracula training. You know, actually, okay, let me
somebody sitting on
here.
Peter Cushing's back.
Yes,
while
he's doing flips. So I mean, Dracula, the name Dracula, right? I mean, I think the etymology of that goes back to dragon, right? And we've got an Asian film here. We've got a dragon. I mean, we're in a post Bruce Lee world. If there was somebody that had even less morals than a lot of other filmmakers at the time, I mean, Dracula could be a Bruce exploitation scenario where it's Bruce Lee is Dracula.
Yeah.
There is,
and you do like an Ed Wood kind of like cloak your face.
Yeah. There's who even knows, but I'm confident Bruce Lee would have done at least one horror movie in his career if he had lived on.
This comes up a lot. I mean, since we've done Bruce Lee, I mean, it's just imagine what the world of cinema would be like if he had been around for a little longer.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But he defeats Dracula, and it spends like a good minute showing Dracula slowly like dissolve into nothing.
I feel like it's like 8 or 9 like different like effects like pieces that they transition to and from.
Yeah, because at first it's his face, and then he turns into like he's a skeleton, and the eyes like fall back into
That's
his
my
skull.
favorite. Yeah,
that's a good one.
That's
And
so
then
good.
it's just the I love the spear falls after his body decays after a certain amount.
I mean, a great touch.
Well,
It's
in the
honestly a
American
great-
version,
good touch.
just cut this one shot out, and that's why it's 20 minutes shorter. So it's
Yeah.
yeah, nice. Yeah, I mean, and then we get.
And I love, appropriately enough, that's kind of it.
It's almost like
yeah,
a Hong
totally.
Kong ending where it's like, all right, no exposition, no, epilogue,
No freeze frame, but
yeah, we do
right.
get scrolling credits, which is exciting.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of it. Which, again, it kind of rules. Is the movie had a purpose and it did it.
Yeah,
And-
this was another film that my buddy John, I mentioned to him about him on some of our samurai footage, samurai episodes. He suggested it to me, and I mean, I definitely had a little note in my brain like I wanted to do this. So I'm glad that we got to cover this for Halloween, and I'm glad that you guys enjoyed it. It's also a little detour from our Yungwoo Ping stuff. I did see that he does have like some type of like kind of a spooky encounters type film that actually I'm not familiar with, that maybe we could visit at another Halloween time. But
I
for
think that'd be
sure.
awesome next Halloween.
yeah, I thought this one would be a fun little sidetrack for us today.
Oh yeah, it's weird. It's right up my alley. I was kind of I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie. I was fully expecting it to be like just very awkward and bizarre, and instead it's really good. It's a big recommend for me. If Shaw Brothers or Peter Cushing means anything to you, it's really cool to see these two worlds colliding.
Yeah,
Dude,
we've had Oily Maniac is another thing that I always like to think about, and Shaw Brothers would like to. I mean, they explored a lot of things. We covered Super Inframan, and we haven't done The Mighty Peking Man, and I think after we've covered Godzilla, we're very rife in our, we should definitely talk about The Mighty Peking Man next time we revisit kaiju films.
I like it. Is that it? Do we have anything else?
Yeah, I don't
short
know.
guy.
No, this is such a blast.
I didn't get too much into Castlevania. There's timeline stuff that I was like thinking about, but with Castlevania, it goes like way back to like the Crusades. I think the Castlevania 3, which is like one of the earliest in the time. I mean, the timeline goes way back, but like as far as the 3 Nintendo Castlevania games, 3 is like what takes place first, and I think that's like 1700s, but like Simon Belmont and stuff, like that's like 1800s. This film is like 1800s. Oh, I think like Horror of Dracula is like late 1800s. Where was it? Yeah, Horror of Dracula takes place in 1885. So it's kind of fun to think about that. Oh, the other thing that I should mention too is Peter Cushing does like basically an audio book version of this film. They released it on they released it on an LP, and it's more of like an audio drama. And I found it. There's like a YouTube rip of it basically, and it's more of him
the real heroes.
Yeah, he's relating the story, and there's like music and sound effects, and
dude, awesome.
That's a really cool thing. I think if you're familiar with this film, that's where I actually saw that he mentions that his name is Lawrence Van Helsing, and
gotcha.
Crazy.
Yeah, so it's kind of fun to check it out. That would be something like what Marty says, like put it on during a Halloween party or something. Like you have Peter Cushing narrating some creepy stuff.
Oh, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh man, in
really.
another dimension, I'm just picturing now like MJ's sequel to Thriller could have had a Peter Cushing rap. Would that have been? Oh, dude.
Nice. I think
could have Peter Cushing lived until like the mid '90s, I think. So
was it that
But
far?
yeah,
Whoa.
him reading an
Yeah.
audiobook at your Halloween party is basically like a thriller rap.
it's basically the
so,
same thing.
Yeah.
No. Nice. That's pretty much all I got.
Well, dude, thanks for this
Halloween.
movie. This was like, this is so
Do
fun.
you guys? I mean, I know I talked to Matthew a little bit. He hosted a Halloween party, which is that's pretty awesome. I've never hosted a Halloween party before.
Oh yeah, it's very easy.
Did
Just
you-
tell people to come and dress up.
Did
and
you do the
then
thing where you
give them
have
drinks?
the grapes in a bowl and make them touch the grapes?
We thought about it. Well, we didn't do
Nice.
that. What we did do was we made some cinnamon rolls that looked like intestines.
Oh,
Oh, dude,
amazing.
nice.
Joanna had this goofy idea, and we've never. I mean, this was like sometimes we're just riffing on stuff and joking around, and she had an idea for kind of tater tot called Terror Tots, and
I love that.
it actually has like ketchup in the tater tot, so it's like blood when you like bite into
It's like
Nice.
I like it.
it. Patent pending.
Yeah. TM. Don't steal.
right.
I like it.
Sweet.
That's all I got.
Yeah, that's all I got. Short one this week, but
Mhm.
super fun. But yeah, thank you so much for checking out our show. If you liked it, then you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're at Heroes, the number 3 podcast on all 3 of them. Also Blue Sky and Threads. I need to. That's not muscle memory to my head yet, so I gotta get on that. And yeah, next week we're continuing our look at Yuen Wu Ping movies. And so, Marty, what is our training for next week?
Yeah, I'm so excited for us. We are returning to Yuen Wu Ping with an absolute classic, 1982's The Miracle Fighters. This is a co-production
Oh, yeah.
between that Yuen Wu Ping's Peace Films, which got its debut with the Buddhist Fist, and Golden Harvest. So we get to see kind of what the Yuen clan gets up to with a little bit more means and budget. And yeah, so excited.
Oh man, such a good time. I can't wait to talk about this movie.
Well, until next week, we're taking a look at The Miracle Fighters. I'm Matthew,
I'm Marty.
I'm Carlos.
and we are the Heroes 3. Remember your training. Heroes 3 is part of the Mercado Brothers Podcast Network.